Welcome to today's math lesson on solving equations with variables on both sides. Our Do Now reads an advertising banner. It has 4 sections as modeled below. 2 sections are congruent trapezoids, and 2 sections are congruent right triangles. So the 2 congruent trapezoids are right here. Congruent meaning the same shape, same size, and the 2 congruent right triangles are right here at the ends. What is the area of the banner in square meters? So we have to find the composite area. So first, I'm going to write out the area formula for the trapezoid. And then for the right triangle, the formulas are actually pretty similar since a trapezoid consists of a right triangle. So we have area of a trapezoid is equal to half times base 1 plus base 2 times height. And then the area formula for a triangle is half times base times height. So starting with the trapezoid, we have half. One of the bases is 4 meters, the other base is 3. So we have to add them together, 3 plus 4. Then the height of the trapezoid, since they're congruent, if this is 2 meters, I know that this right here is 2 meters. So then I'm multiplying by 2. So according to order of operations, I have to do whatever is in the parentheses first. 3 plus 4 is 7. Then I have to multiply. So 7 times 2 is 14. 14 divided by 2, or 14 times half, is 7. So my area of one trapezoid is 7 meters square. But because I have 2 trapezoids, I have to double the 7 meters. So 7 times 2 is 14. So the area of the 2 trapezoids is 14 meters square. Then I have to find the area of one of the triangles. So to do that, I'm multiplying half times the base length of the triangle is 2 1/4. I'm going to turn that into a decimal. 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. So I have 2.25. So I have half times 2.25 times the height of the triangle, which is 3. So then when I multiply it out all together, I get 3.375 meters square. And because I have 2 triangles that are congruent, so meaning the same shape, same size, so of course they're going to have the same area, I'm going to have to double 3.375. And that is going to be 6.75 meters square. And then to find the composite area, or the area of all the shapes all together, I'm going to add together the 6.75 plus the 14 and that gives me 20.75. So my answer to this problem is 20.75 meters squared. So our TEK for today is 8.8c, and our lesson target is I will solve 1 variable equations with variables on both sides of the equal sign. My DOL is given 4 problems. I will solve 1 variable equations with variables on both sides of the equal sign with 100% accuracy. Some academic vocabulary for us to go over before we get into the meat of today's lesson is algebraic expressions. So each side of the equation, each side of the equal to sign has an algebraic expression. So in this case, we have 15 plus 6x and 45 plus 8x. Coefficients are the numbers in front of variables. So in this case, our variable is x, so our coefficients are 6 and 8. The constants in the algebraic expression is 15 and 45. It's an equation because it has an equal to sign. Rational numbers are all numbers that are decimals and fractions, or that can be written as decimals, fractions, that include whole numbers as well as positive and negative numbers. We're solving for a solution, and zero pair is when we subtract the 6x minus itself, or when we subtract 45 by itself. That's how we make a zero pair, to cancel it out. So for this word problem, it says yellow taxi has no pickup fee but charges 25 cents per mile. AAA taxi charges $3 for pickup and 15 cents per mile. Find the number of miles for which the cost of the two taxis is the same. So we're going to start by writing equations for the yellow taxi and the AAA taxi. So the equation for the yellow taxi is that it's 0.25 times x, or 25 cents times x. And per is our keyword to tell us that 0.25 is our coefficient. And then since $3 is the initial fee, or the fee for the pickup, that's going to be our constant. And then we have 15 cents per mile, so that's going to be plus 0.15x. So now that we have our equation, we actually have to get rid of the decimals. So as you can see, we have 0.25 and 0.15. So to do that, we have to multiply everything by 100. So both sides by 100. So that's why we multiplied 100 by 0.25. When we do that, we get 25x. Then we multiplied 100 times 3, which gives us 300. And then we multiplied 100 times 0.15x, which gives us 15x. So the first thing that we want to do is make a zero pair with our coefficient, right? So we're trying to at least move one of the coefficients from one side to the other. So in this case, since 15 is smaller than 25, we're going to subtract by 15. So 15x minus 15x makes a zero pair. So that cancels each other out. And then we have 25x minus 15x. 25 minus 15 is 10x. And then we're just left with the 300. Because again, the 15x minus 15x made a zero pair, is zero, cancels out. Now we have 10x is equal to 30. To solve for what x is, we have to do the opposite operation of what we see here. So here we're multiplying 10 by x. So the opposite of multiplying by 10 is dividing both sides by 10. So we're going to divide both sides by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1, so we're left with 1x. 300 divided by 10, we see two zeros, we can cross it out. 30 divided by 1 is 30. So our answer is going to be 30. And so that means that the cost is the same for both taxis for 30 miles. So once the taxis both drive 30 miles, the cost will be the same. Okay, now for this first I do. It says a water tank holds 25.6 gallons, but is leaking at a rate of 3 gallons per week. So I'm annotating, we have 25.6. Since it's leaking, I'm going to be subtracting. My variable in this case is going to be W, which stands for the number of weeks. We could use any letter to represent the number of weeks. And it's leaking at a rate of 3 gallons per week, so minus 3W. Then it says a second water tank holds 38.4 gallons. So we have 38.4, but is leaking. So again, we're subtracting at a rate of 5 gallons per week. So our keyword being per. So it's going to be minus 5. And I meant to write W up here. And then the question is, after how many weeks will the amount of water in the two tanks be the same? So that's when I'm going to put an equal to sign. So now we have our equation for our word problem. Then step 2 is to get rid of any decimals or fractions by multiplying the equation by the least place, the place value, or the least common denominator, the LCD. So in this case, we're going to have to multiply by 10 because we want to try to get rid of this decimal point. So we only need to move the decimal point one place to the right. So that's the same thing as multiplying both sides or everything by 10. Ten times 25.6. Again, we're moving the decimal point one place to the right, so that makes 256. Then we have 10 times 3w, but it's negative 10 times 3w, so we're going to keep the minus sign, which makes 30w. 10 times 38.4 gives us 384. Then we have 10 times 5w. Again, it's negative 10 times 5w, so I'm going to keep the minus, and that's 50w. Okay, so now we're here, and we have to make a zero pair, our first zero pair with the coefficients. So we basically have to move our coefficients to one side of the equation. And so I'm going to identify which one is smaller. It doesn't really matter which one you move, because at the end of the day, if you solve the equations fully, you should be getting the same answer. But in this case, I'm going to move my 30w because it's smaller. And so the opposite of subtracting by 30w is going to be to add both sides by 30w. And so that leaves us with 256. Negative 30w plus 30w makes 0, so that's our zero pair. And then we have 384. Negative 50 plus 30, the signs are not the same. Negative 50 is negative, 30 is positive. So if it's not the same, then we're not actually going to do the operation that they're telling us to do, which is adding. We're going to do the opposite, which is subtracting. 50 minus 30 is 20. And I can't forget the w since that variable is detached. And then the negative 50 has a bigger absolute value because the absolute value of negative 50 is positive 50 and the absolute value of 30 is 30. So it's going to be negative 50 plus 30 is actually negative 20. So now we have 256 is equal to 384 minus 20w. And now we have to make a zero pair with the constant terms to isolate the variable, to keep the variable on its own side. So to do that, I'm going to move the 384 to the other side. The opposite of adding by 384 or positive 384 is subtracting 384 on both sides. So 256 minus 384 is negative 128. And then our zero pair is the 384, since when we subtract 384 by itself, we get 0. Then we're left with the negative 20w. So we cannot forget the negative because that'll change the sign of our answer if we do. So we have negative 128 is equal to negative 20w. So now we have to divide both sides of the equation by the coefficient to solve. So basically, we're trying to isolate the variable. We're trying to get w on a side by itself and then the constant on the other side. So the opposite of multiplying by 20 is dividing by 20. So that's why we ended up dividing. And it was negative 20w is equal to negative 128. A negative divided by negative is a positive. 128 divided by 20 is 6.4. So our answer is that it will take 6.4 weeks for the tanks to have the same amount of water in them. Our next I do involves fractions. So as you can see, we have to solve 7/10 n plus 3 over 2 is equal to 3/5 n plus 2. So just to review, our success criteria is I can solve one variable equations with variables on both sides of the equal sign, and then I can explain the meaning of the solution to the equation. So the solution is the number that makes the equation true, right? Because they have to be equivalent. Let's say if you imagine that the value of one side of the equation is on a scale, like the left side of a scale, and the value of the other side of the equation is on the right side of a scale, it has to have the same overall value, even though there could be different amounts and different items. Okay, so step one, we have to determine the least common multiple of the denominators to find our least common denominator. So our least common denominator of 2, 5, and 10. So if I skip count by 2, I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If I skip count by 5, I have 5, 10. If I skip count by 10, I have 10, 20. So the smallest number between all of them is going to be 10. So that means my denominator is going to be 10. So I'm going to multiply the algebraic expressions on both sides by 10. So we have 10 times 7 over 10n plus 10 times 3 over 2n is equal to 10 times 3 over 5n plus 10 times 2. So remember that when we're multiplying whole numbers and fractions, we multiply the whole number by the numerator and then divide it by the denominator if possible. If not, then we can just keep it as a fraction. So we have 10 times 7, which is 70. 70 divided by 10 is 7. So we have 7n. Then we have 10 times 3, which is 30. 30 divided by 2, which is 15. So we have 15n is equal to, then we have 10 times 3, which is 30. 30 divided by 5 is 6n. And lastly, we have 10 times 2, which is 20. So now we have all whole numbers. We have 7n plus 15n is equal to 6n plus 20. So the first thing that I have to do is move my coefficients to one side to be with each other. So the smaller coefficient is the 6n. So I'm going to move this 6n to the other side. And so the opposite of adding by 6n is subtracting both sides by 6n. So that is my first zero pair. Seven n minus 6n is 1n. So we have 1n plus 15n. So I realized I actually made a mistake. I accidentally added an n up here. So it wasn't 3/2 n, it was just 3/2. So instead of it being 15n, it's just 15. Okay, so we have 1n plus 15 is equal to, our zero pair was the 6n's because 6n minus 6n is 0. So it's equal to 20. So the next thing that I have to do is make my second zero pair, or I have to move my constant to be on the other side with my constant. So the opposite of adding 15 is going to be to subtract 15. So this is my second zero pair. 15 minus 15 is 0. So then I'm left with 1n is equal to 20 minus 15, which is 5. So 1n is the same thing as just n. So our answer is n is equal to 5. So if we plug in 5 into the equation, so if we multiply 7/10 times 5 plus 3 over 2, that'll be equal to 3 over 5 times 5 plus 2, the values of both sides. So there's several we do problems and you do problems. And lastly is your DOL. It's 4 problems and it's in a Google form. Thank you so much for following along in today's math lesson, and see you in the next math video. Bye.